The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform, where Zelda Garrison stood with her hands clasped together, trying desperately to maintain whatever shred of dignity remained as the auctioneer's voice rang out across the dusty square of Calico, California, announcing her like she was nothing more than a mare at a livestock sale. It was the autumn of 1883, and Zelda had lived 21 years on this earth, the last 3 of which had been spent as the unwanted stepdaughter of Marcus Trent, a man whose gambling debts had finally caught up with him in the worst possible way. When he could not pay what he owed to the ruthless banker who controlled half the town, he had offered Zelda instead, presenting her to be married off to whoever would settle his accounts. The banker, caring nothing for her fate, had simply announced that she would go to the highest bidder willing to take on a wife. Zelda kept her eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the crowd of men who had gathered, some curious, some leering, most looking at her the same way they might examine a horse's teeth before purchase. She wore her only good dress, a faded blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother before the fever took her 7 years ago. Her dark blonde hair was pinned up as neatly as she could manage, though strands had escaped in the heat. She refused to cry, refused to give Marcus or anyone else in this godless town the satisfaction of seeing her break. The bidding started low. A ranch hand offered $20. A shopkeeper countered with 30. Zelda felt bile rise in her throat as the numbers climbed, as men who had never spoken a word to her decided her worth in cold currency. She thought of running, but where would she go? She had no money, no family, no options that would not end with her starving in the desert or worse. Then a voice cut through the crowd, deep and steady, with an edge of barely controlled anger. $500 and my best mare. The crowd went silent, turning to see who had spoken. Zelda's gaze followed, landing on a tall man who stood apart from the others, his dusty brown hat shading eyes that even from a distance she could see were a striking pale blue. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn denim pants, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A gun belt hung at his hip, the revolver looking well-maintained but not ostentatious. Everything about him spoke of a working man, someone who earned his living by the sweat of his brow rather than by exploiting others. The auctioneer stammered, clearly not expecting such a bid. That is quite generous, Mr. Aldridge. Anyone care to counter?" The crowd murmured, but no one spoke up. $500 was more than most men in Calico saw in a year, and a good horse on top of that made it a fortune. "Sold, then, to Zachary Aldridge," the auctioneer declared with false cheer, banging his gavel. Zelda's legs nearly gave out beneath her. So this was it. She was sold, owned, given away like livestock, just as her stepfather had promised. She had a new master now, this Zachary Aldridge, and she knew nothing about him except that he apparently had money to burn and wanted a wife badly enough to pay a small fortune for one. Zachary moved through the crowd with purpose, his long strides eating up the distance. Up close, Zelda could see he was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and the kind of lean, muscular build that came from hard physical labor. His face was handsome in a rugged way, all strong angles and a firm jaw shadowed with a few days' worth of stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, those pale blue eyes that looked at her not with the hunger or possession she expected, but with something that almost resembled kindness. He reached the platform and extended his hand to help her down. "Madam," he said quietly. Zelda hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but gentle. When her feet touched the ground, she swayed slightly from the shock and heat, and his other hand came up to steady her elbow. Easy now, he murmured. When did you last eat? The question surprised her so much that she answered honestly. Yesterday morning. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. Right. First thing, we get you fed, then we will talk. He guided her away from the platform, away from the gawking crowd and Marcus Trent, who was already counting his blood money with greedy fingers. Zelda walked beside this stranger who had just purchased her, her mind reeling, trying to understand what happened and what would happen next. They walked down the dusty main street of Calico, past the saloon where piano music jangled through the air, past the general store and the post office. Zachary led her to a small restaurant tucked between the gunsmith and the telegraph office. Inside, it was blessedly cooler, and the smell of cooking food made Zelda's stomach clench with sudden hunger. 2 plates of whatever you have ready, and water, Zachary told the woman behind the counter, then guided Zelda to a table in the back corner, away from the window where curious eyes might peer in. Zelda sat, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. Zachary took the seat across from her, removing his hat and setting it on the chair beside him. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck. He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze, to not cower or look away. I imagine you have questions, he said finally. I imagine I do not have the right to ask them, Zelda replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite read. You have every right, but let me say something first while we have privacy. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and earnest. What happened back there, what your stepfather did, it is one of the vilest things I have ever witnessed in all my years. No human being should be traded like property. I could not stand by and watch it happen. So you bought me out of pity. The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with the humiliation burning in her chest. I bought your freedom, Zachary corrected firmly. There is a difference. Before Zelda could respond, the restaurant owner brought their food, 2 plates piled with beef stew and fresh bread, along with 2 large glasses of water. Zelda stared at the meal, her throat tight. Eat, Zachary said gently. Please, we can talk after. She picked up her spoon with shaking hands and took a bite. The food was good, hearty and warm, and once she started, she found she could not stop. She ate with the desperation of someone who had been rationed and neglected for far too long. Zachary ate too, but slower, watching her with those observant eyes. When she finally set down her spoon, the plate nearly clean, she felt marginally more human. She drank the water gratefully, then made herself look at him again. You said you bought my freedom. What does that mean? Zachary pushed his own half-finished plate aside and leaned back in his chair. It means exactly what I said. I have a ranch about 10 miles outside of town, the AA. It is not huge, but it is mine, paid for and worked by my own hands. I have a house, a barn, some cattle and horses. I live alone, have for the past 5 years since I bought the land. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Here is what I am proposing. You come to the ranch with me. I have a spare room, belonged to my sister before she married and moved to San Francisco. You can have it, your own space. You can work on the ranch if you want to earn your keep, or you can simply rest and recover from whatever hell you have been living through. In 6 months, when the circuit judge comes through again, I will pay for your passage anywhere you want to go and give you enough money to start fresh wherever that might be. Or, if you decide you want to stay, we can discuss other arrangements. Zelda stared at him, certain she had misheard. You spent $500 and a horse to what? Give me a place to stay for 6 months. I spent $500 and a horse to keep you from ending up in the hands of one of those vultures circling that platform, Zachary said, his voice hard with conviction. I have seen what happens to women in situations like yours. I would not wish that fate on anyone. You do not know me. I could be terrible. I could steal from you or burn your house down." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she had seen from him. "Are you planning to do any of those things?" "No, but you could not have known that when you bid on me." I saw a young woman standing up there with her head held high, refusing to cry even though she had every right to, and I knew enough. He met her eyes steadily. "I am not asking anything from you, Zelda. No obligations, no expectations. Just a safe place to stay and time to figure out what you want from your life." It was too much, too good to be possibly true. Zelda's experience with men had taught her that they always wanted something, always expected payment for any kindness. "And if I say no, then I will pay for a room at the boarding house for you, give you the money anyway, and you never have to see me again," Zachary said simply. "The choice is yours. It will always be yours." Tears stung Zelda's eyes, the first since this nightmare began. She blinked them back furiously. "Why? Why would you do this?" Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the dusty street baked under the afternoon sun. "My sister, Emma, she got into some trouble when she was younger. Fell in love with the wrong man, he left her in a bad situation. If it were not for a kind stranger who helped her when she needed it most, who knows where she would have ended up? I have always believed in paying that kindness forward." He looked back at Zelda. "Besides, I meant what I said. What happened to you today was wrong, dead wrong. If I can do something to make it right, even a little bit, then I will." Zelda sat with his words, turning them over in her mind. She could walk away, take the money and the room, be alone. Or she could take a chance on this stranger who spoke of freedom and choices and looked at her like she was a person rather than property. "I will come to your ranch," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now, at least. And thank you. I do not think anyone has ever thanked you." The smile that crossed Zachary's face then was warm and genuine, transforming his features. "You are welcome. Now, do you have belongings you need to collect?" "Not much. A bag at Marcus's place." "Then we will get it and head out. I would like to be home before dark." They left the restaurant, Zachary insisting on paying despite the owner's protests that the meal was on the house when she learned what he had done. Word apparently traveled fast in Calico. They walked to the shabby house on the edge of town where Marcus Trent lived, and Zelda retrieved her single canvas bag containing 2 changes of clothes, her mother's Bible, and a small wooden horse her father had carved for her before he died. Marcus was not there, probably drinking away his newfound wealth, and Zelda was grateful. She never wanted to see his face again. Zachary's horse was a magnificent black stallion named Rebel, tied outside the general store. Beside him was a smaller chestnut mare, already saddled. "This is Poppy," Zachary said, stroking the mare's nose. "She is gentle and sure-footed. Do you ride?" "I used to when my father was alive. It has been years, though." "It will come back to you. We will take it slow." He helped her mount, his hands respectful, steadying her until she found her seat. Then he climbed onto Rebel with the easy grace of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot, and they set off. The ride out of Calico took them through increasingly sparse landscape. The town itself sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills dotted with Joshua trees and scrub brush. As they rode, the afternoon began its slow decline toward evening, the fierce heat easing into something more tolerable. Zachary kept Rebel at an easy pace, frequently checking to make sure Zelda was managing. She was sore and awkward at first, but gradually her body remembered the rhythm of riding. The quiet was unexpected, broken only by the steady clip of hooves and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. After the chaos and humiliation of the day, The peace of it settled over Zelda like a balm. "How long have you been at the ranch?" she asked after they had been riding for perhaps half an hour. "5 years, like I said. Bought it with money I saved up working cattle drives and ranch hand jobs all over California and Nevada. Always wanted a place of my own, somewhere I could put down roots." "Do you run it all by yourself?" "Mostly. I hire on a couple of hands during branding and roundup season, but day to day it is just me. I keep about 200 head of cattle, some horses. It is enough to make a living, not enough to make me rich." He glanced at her. "Is honest work, though, and it is mine." "It sounds nice," Zelda said, and meant it. "What about you? What did you do before today?" Zelda's hands tightened on the reins. "My father owned a small farm, grew vegetables mostly. After he died, my mother tried to keep it going, but the work was too much. She married Marcus thinking he would help, but he was more interested in drinking and cards than farming. When she died, he sold the farm and we moved to Calico. He got jobs here and there, but mostly he gambled. I worked when I could, taking in washing, mending, whatever I could find. The money I earned went to his debts more often than not." "He had no right," Zachary said quietly, anger threading through his voice. "No right to do what he did to you." "Maybe not, but he did it anyway. That is the way of things, I suppose. It does not have to be." They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The landscape began to change, more vegetation appearing as they followed a path that wound alongside a creek. Then, as they crested a low rise, Zachary gestured ahead. "There, the double A." Zelda looked and felt her breath catch. The ranch spread out in a valley fed by the creek, green and lush compared to the surrounding desert. The house was a single-story structure built of wood and stone, not large but solid and well-maintained. A barn stood nearby, along with several corrals where horses grazed. Cattle dotted the pastures in the distance, and the whole scene was bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. "It is beautiful," Zelda breathed. Pride flickered across Zachary's face. "Thank you. I have worked hard to make it so." They descended into the valley, and as they approached the house, several dogs came bounding out, barking in greeting. Zachary laughed and called to them by name, Duke, Lady, and Scout, and they circled the horses with wagging tails. At the barn, Zachary dismounted and came around to help Zelda down. Her legs were shaky when her feet hit the ground, sore from riding, and she stumbled. Zachary caught her easily, his hands on her waist steadying her. "Sorry," she mumbled, acutely aware of his closeness, the strength in his hands. "Nothing to apologize for. You did well for someone who has not ridden in years." He released her and stepped back, giving her space. "Let me get the horses settled, and then I will show you the house." Zelda watched as he led both horses into the barn, speaking to them in low, soothing tones. She stood in the yard with the dogs sniffing curiously at her skirts, looking around at this place that was to be her home, at least temporarily. It felt surreal, like she would wake any moment back in Marcus's house, the whole thing a dream, but it was not a dream. When Zachary emerged from the barn and gestured for her to follow him to the house, when she climbed the 3 wooden steps to the porch and he opened the door, it was all solidly, wonderfully real. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy table with chairs near the kitchen section. Everything was neat and clean, if a bit sparse on decoration. Doorways led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. "This is the main room, as you can see," Zachary said, setting his hat on a peg by the door. "My room is there," he pointed to one doorway, "and this one here is the spare room, yours for as long as you are here." He led her to the second doorway and opened the door. The room beyond was small but bright, with a window overlooking the side pasture. A bed with a simple quilt stood against one wall, a dresser against another, and a small table with a wash basin. A rag rug covered the floor, and everything was clean and ready for use. "Emma left some things in the dresser," Zachary said. "Clothes and such. You are welcome to anything that fits or that you need. I know you did not have much in your bag." Zelda set her canvas bag on the bed, running her hand over the quilt. "This is too much. You have already done too much." "It is a room that was sitting empty," Zachary said. "I am glad to have it used. Now, are you hungry again? I could make us some supper." "I can cook," Zelda said quickly. "If you have ingredients, I would be happy to make something. I want to help to earn my keep." Zachary studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If you want to, I would appreciate it. I am not much of a cook myself, tend to stick to the basics. But you do not have to, Zelda. You have had a hard day. No one would blame you if you just wanted to rest." "I would rather keep busy," Zelda admitted. "It will help me not to think so much." "Fair enough. Come on then, I will show you where everything is." He led her back to the kitchen area and showed her the pantry, which was reasonably well stocked with beans, flour, salt pork, dried vegetables, and various preserves. There were fresh eggs from the chickens she had not yet seen, and a cold box with butter and milk. Zelda rolled up her sleeves and set to work, grateful for the familiar task. She made biscuits and fried up some salt pork, putting together a simple but hearty meal. Zachary sat at the table watching her, answering her questions about where things were kept, offering to help but accepting when she said she had it handled. "You are good at that," he observed as she deftly shaped the biscuit dough. "My mother taught me." She said a woman should know her way around a kitchen, not because it is her place but because everyone needs to eat and it is a useful skill. Smart woman. She was. I miss her every day. They ate together as the last of the daylight faded outside and Zachary lit lamps to push back the darkness. The meal was good if simple, and they ate in companionable quiet. Afterward, Zelda cleaned up, again refusing Zachary's help, needing to do something useful with her hands. When the kitchen was tidy, exhaustion finally caught up with her. The day had been so long, so emotionally draining, and her body ached from tension and riding. "I think I should sleep," she said, stifling a yawn. "Of course. There is water in the pitcher in your room for washing, and there is an outhouse about 20 yards behind the house. I will show you." He walked her outside in the darkness, pointing out the small structure. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky in brilliant profusion. When they returned to the house, Zachary showed her where he kept extra blankets if she got cold, reminded her where everything was, and then bid her good night. "If you need anything, anything at all, my door will be open. Just call out." "Thank you, Zachary, for everything. I still do not entirely understand why you did what you did today, but I am grateful." He met her eyes in the lamplight. "You do not need to understand it. Just know that you are safe here. You have my word on that." She believed him, which was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. In her room, Zelda changed into one of the nightgowns she found in the dresser, soft white cotton that must have belonged to Emma. She washed her face and hands, then climbed into the bed. The mattress was comfortable, the sheets clean and smelling of soap. She lay in the darkness listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the creak of the house settling. She had woken up that morning in Marcus's house, dreading what the day would bring. Now she lay in a comfortable bed in a stranger's house, that stranger having paid a fortune to keep her from a fate she dared not even imagine. It made no sense, went against everything she thought she knew about how the world worked. But Zachary's eyes had been kind, his words sincere. He had looked at her like she mattered, like her choices and her comfort were important. It had been so long since anyone treated her that way that she had almost forgotten what it felt like. Tears came then, sliding silently down her cheeks in the darkness. But they were not tears of despair or fear. They were tears of relief, of overwhelming gratitude, of the faint, fragile beginning of hope. The next morning, Zelda woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly in one of her own dresses, braided her hair, and emerged from her room to find Zachary already up, standing by the stove with a coffee pot. "Morning," he said with a smile. "I hope the coffee did not wake you." "Not at all. I should have been up earlier. What time is it?" "A bit past 7. I have already been out to feed the horses and chickens." "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Zelda admitted. He poured her a cup of coffee and she accepted it gratefully, the bitter warmth chasing away the last of the sleep fog. "I need to ride out and check on the cattle today," Zachary said. "You are welcome to come along if you like, or you can stay here and rest, explore the place, whatever you prefer." Zelda considered. The thought of being alone felt wrong somehow, and she was curious to see more of the ranch. "I would like to come if I would not be in the way." "You would not be. I would enjoy the company, to be honest. Gets lonely out here sometimes, talking to cattle and horses." They had a quick breakfast of leftover biscuits and some preserves, then Zachary saddled the horses again. Zelda was sore from the previous day's ride, but she pushed through it, not wanting to slow him down. They rode out across the ranch, Zachary pointing out various landmarks and explaining his operation. He ran his cattle on open range, but kept them within certain boundaries marked by natural features like the creek and the rocky hills. He knew the land intimately, every water source, every sheltered hollow, every path. "You really love it here," Zelda observed as they paused on a rise overlooking a section of pasture where cattle grazed peacefully. "I do," Zachary agreed. "It is not an easy life, ranching. The work is hard, the weather can be brutal, there are always things going wrong. But it is mine, you know. I built this with my own hands, and there is satisfaction in that." They rode for hours, Zachary checking on the cattle, making mental notes of things that needed attention. He talked as they went, not seeming to mind when Zelda was quiet, just sharing his knowledge of the land and the animals. He spoke about the ranch like some men spoke about family, with deep affection and pride. They stopped by the creek for lunch, Zachary having packed some bread and cheese in his saddlebags. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, the water babbling over rocks nearby, and ate in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Zelda said finally. "Of course." "Yesterday you said your sister, Emma, she got help from a stranger. What happened? If you do not mind talking about it." Zachary was quiet for a moment, tossing a bit of bread to a curious bird. "Emma was 17. I was 22. We had lost our parents a year before to cholera, were living in Sacramento trying to make ends meet. Emma met a man, older, charming. She fell hard for him, thought he was going to marry her. Instead, he got her with child and disappeared, left her alone and scared and desperate." Zelda's heart clenched in sympathy. "That is awful." "It was. She tried to hide it, but I figured it out eventually. I wanted to hunt the man down, make him do right by her, but Emma said no. Said he had made his choice clear and she would not beg. But she was terrified, did not know what to do. Then she met a woman, a widow named Mrs. Chen, who ran a boarding house. Mrs. Chen took Emma in, let her stay through the pregnancy, helped deliver the baby when the time came." "The baby?" Zelda asked gently. "A boy. Beautiful, healthy. Emma wanted to keep him, but she knew she could not then. Mrs. Chen knew a couple, good people who could not have children of their own. They adopted him, gave him a good home. Emma got to hold him once to say goodbye, and then she had to let him go." Zachary's voice was heavy with old pain. It nearly destroyed her, but Mrs. Chen would not let her fall apart. She gave Emma work at the boarding house, taught her to keep books, introduced her to people. 2 years later, Emma met Thomas, a good man who owned a mercantile. He knew everything about her past and loved her anyway. They married and moved to San Francisco. They have 3 children now and they are happy. She was lucky to find Mrs. Chen, Zelda said softly. She was. And I have always remembered what that kindness meant, what it saved Emma from. When I saw you on that platform yesterday, I thought about Emma, about how easily things could have gone differently for her. I could not walk away. Zelda looked at this man beside her, this cowboy who had paid a fortune to save a stranger because his sister had been saved once. You are a good man, Zachary Aldridge. He met her eyes, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. I just try to do what is right, does not always feel like enough. It is enough, Zelda said firmly. More than enough. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon, the sun hot but a breeze making it bearable. Zelda felt more settled than she had in years, the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the vast open sky above, the quiet presence of Zachary beside her. It was strange how quickly this place was beginning to feel like it could be home. Over the following days, a routine established itself. Zachary would rise early and handle the morning chores. Zelda would make breakfast, and they would eat together before deciding on the day's tasks. Sometimes Zelda rode out with him. Sometimes she stayed at the ranch and worked on things around the house. She mended clothes, organized the pantry, started a small vegetable garden in a plot behind the house that had clearly once been used for that purpose, but had been neglected. Zachary never asked her to do any of it. He kept insisting she was free to rest, to do nothing if she chose. But Zelda wanted to contribute, needed to feel useful. And if she was being honest, she enjoyed the work. It felt good to put her hands to tasks that mattered, to see the results of her effort. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Zelda learned that Zachary had always dreamed of having a ranch, even as a boy. That he loved horses more than cattle, but cattle paid better. That his favorite food was apple pie, even though he could not make one to save his life. That he had a scar on his shoulder from being thrown by a bronco when he was 19, and another on his hand from a knife accident while working a cattle drive. Zachary learned that Zelda had wanted to be a teacher before her father died. That she could read and write well, her mother having been educated and insisting Zelda be the same. That she loved thunderstorms, the way they made the air smell clean. That she had a beautiful singing voice but had not sung in years because Marcus always told her to shut up when she tried. That man is a fool, Zachary said when she mentioned this. They were in the barn, Zelda watching as he repaired a broken harness. I would love to hear you sing sometime if you would be comfortable with that. Zelda felt her cheeks warm. Maybe. It has been so long I am not sure I remember how. I bet it would come back to you, like riding did. That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper watching the sun set, Zelda found herself humming, then softly singing an old hymn her mother used to love. Her voice was tentative at first, rusty with disuse, but it gained strength as she continued. When she finished, Zachary was staring at her with something like awe on his face. That was beautiful, he said quietly. Truly beautiful. Thank you, Zelda whispered, feeling vulnerable in a way she had not expected. They sat in silence as the stars emerged, and Zelda felt something shift between them, some subtle deepening of the connection that had been growing since the day he brought her here. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Autumn deepened, the days growing shorter and cooler. Zelda felt herself changing, the constant tension she had carried for years slowly unwinding. She smiled more, laughed at Zachary's stories, found joy in small things like fresh eggs from the chickens or the first vegetables sprouting in her garden. And she noticed Zachary more. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The gentle way he handled the horses, his voice low and soothing. The strength in his arms when he lifted hay bales or mended fences. The kindness that seemed to flow from him as naturally as breathing. She caught him watching her sometimes, his gaze soft and unguarded before he noticed her noticing and looked away. It made her heart flutter in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. One evening, about a month after she arrived at the ranch, they were in the kitchen together. Zelda was making stew for supper. Zachary was supposed to be reading the newspaper he had picked up in town earlier, but he kept getting distracted watching her move around the kitchen. "You are staring," Zelda said without looking at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "Sorry," Zachary said, not sounding sorry at all. "I was just thinking how nice it is having someone else here. The house feels more alive." "It is nice," Zelda agreed, finally turning to face him. "I like it here, Zachary, more than I thought I would." Something in her tone made him set down the newspaper and give her his full attention. "I am glad. You seem happier, more at ease." "I am. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe, like I am not just surviving but actually living." She hesitated, then continued. "I have been thinking about what you said that day in Calico, about the 6 months. Zachary's expression became carefully neutral. "What about it?" "I do not think I want to leave when the time comes. If the offer still stands to stay, I would like to." The smile that broke across Zachary's face was brilliant. "Of course it stands. You are welcome here as long as you want to be here. I have loved having you here, Zelda, truly." "I have loved being here," she said softly, holding his gaze. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something unspoken. Zachary stood, moving closer but still maintaining a respectful distance. "Zelda, I need to be honest with you about something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "When I bid on you that day, it really was to keep you safe. I had no ulterior motives, no expectations. But these past weeks, getting to know you, having you here, I have developed feelings for you. Feelings that go beyond friendship or charity." He ran a hand through his hair, looking nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I understand if you do not feel the same. I know the circumstances of how we met were not exactly romantic, and I do not want you to feel obligated in any way, but I care about you deeply, and I wanted you to know." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. She had been trying not to examine her own feelings too closely, afraid of what she might find, afraid it was too soon or inappropriate or just a result of gratitude. But hearing Zachary's confession, seeing the vulnerability and hope in his eyes, she could not deny the truth any longer. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I have been trying to tell myself it is too soon, that I am just grateful to you for saving me, but it is more than that. You make me laugh, you make me feel safe, you treat me like I matter. I think about you all the time, and when we are together I am happy in a way I have never been before." "Really?" The hope in Zachary's voice made her heart ache in the best way. "Really?" She took a step closer to him, then another, until only a foot of space separated them. "I am falling in love with you, Zachary. Maybe I already have fallen. I know it is fast and complicated and probably foolish, but it is true." "It is not foolish," Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am falling in love with you too. Have been since you sang that hymn on the porch and looked at the sunset like it was the most beautiful thing you had ever seen." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her cheek with his hand. His palm was warm and calloused, his touch gentle. Zelda leaned into it, her eyes drifting closed for a moment. "Can I kiss you?" Zachary asked, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Please," Zelda breathed. He leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, soft and sweet and perfect. Zelda's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss was tender, unhurried, filled with all the feelings that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said quietly. "I want to court you properly, give you the romance you deserve, and when enough time has passed, when we are both certain, I want to marry you, if you will have me." Tears pricked Zelda's eyes. "I would like that, all of it." "Yeah, yeah." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Zelda felt like she was flying. This man, this wonderful, kind, genuine man, loved her, wanted to marry her. After everything she had been through, all the pain and fear and humiliation, she had found this. The stew boiled over on the stove, the hissing sound breaking them apart with startled laughs. They scrambled to rescue supper, bumping into each other in the small kitchen, stealing kisses between stirring the pot and slicing bread. It was chaotic and perfect and exactly right. After they ate, they sat on the porch again, but this time Zachary pulled a second chair close to his and they held hands, fingers intertwined, watching the stars emerge. "Tell me something you have always wanted to do," Zelda said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Raise horses," Zachary said immediately. "Not just keep a few, but really breed and train them. Build a reputation for quality stock. You should do it. You are so good with them." "Maybe I will. With the right partner, anything feels possible." They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams, until the cold drove them inside. At the door to her room, Zachary kissed her goodnight, sweet and chaste, and bid her sleep well. Zelda lay in bed with her fingers pressed to her lips, reliving every moment. She had never felt anything like this overwhelming joy, this certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Zelda had imagined. Zachary was attentive and romantic, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, teaching her to ride better so they could explore farther together, reading to her in the evenings from books of poetry he borrowed from the town library. He respected her completely, never pushing for more than she was comfortable with, always asking before touching her, making sure she felt safe and cherished. They kissed often, stolen moments of sweetness that made Zelda's heart race. But Zachary was always a gentleman, always careful of her reputation and her comfort. Word had spread in Calico about Zachary purchasing Zelda and what happened next. Most people thought he was a saint. A few thought he was a fool, and some speculated about his true intentions. But when Zachary took Zelda to town on Sundays for church, holding her hand proudly, introducing her to people as the woman he was courting, most of the gossip died down. The exceptions were a few bitter individuals, including Marcus Trent, who had drunk through his blood money and now blamed Zelda for his continued misfortune. One day in late November, as Zelda was leaving the general store with her shopping, Marcus cornered her in the alley beside the building. "Think you are better than me now," he slurred, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Living in sin with that cowboy, putting on airs." "I am not living in sin," Zelda said firmly, trying to step around him. "And I do not think I am better than you, Marcus. I just think you are a terrible person who sold me like I was a cow. Now let me pass." "You ungrateful little wretch," Marcus snarled, grabbing her arm. "I fed you, kept a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me." "Let go of me," Zelda demanded, fear beginning to spike through her anger. "I will do no such thing. You owe me, you little," she said. "Let go." Zachary's voice cut through the alley like a whip. He stood at the entrance, his expression darker than Zelda had ever seen it. He moved forward with dangerous intent, and Marcus released Zelda's arm immediately, stumbling backward. "We were just talking," Marcus said, trying to sound defiant but mostly sounding scared. "Looked like more than talking to me," Zachary said coldly. "Looked like you were putting your hands on her against her will. She is my stepdaughter. I have a right to. You have no rights where she is concerned. You gave those up when you sold her on a platform like Livestock." Zachary positioned himself between Zelda and Marcus, his hand resting on his gun belt in clear warning. "You go near her again, speak to her again, even look at her wrong again, and I will make sure the sheriff knows about it. And if the sheriff does not handle it to my satisfaction, I will handle it myself. Are we clear?" Marcus paled. "You cannot threaten me." "That was not a threat. That was a promise. Now get out of here before I change my mind about being civil." Marcus fled, tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. Zachary watched him go, then turned to Zelda, his expression softening immediately. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Zelda said, though her hands were shaking. "Thank you for intervening." "Always," Zachary said, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "I will always protect you, Zelda. I promise you that." She held on to him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and soap that she had come to associate with safety and home. They saw Marcus once more after that from a distance, but he never approached again. Good riddance, Zelda thought. As winter approached and the days grew colder, Zelda and Zachary grew closer. They worked side by side during the day, preparing the ranch for winter, making sure the cattle had access to shelter and food, stocking the house with supplies. In the evenings they sat by the fire, talking or reading or simply being together in comfortable silence. Zachary taught Zelda to play chess on an old set that had belonged to his father. Zelda taught Zachary to make proper biscuits instead of the sad lumps he usually produced. They laughed together, worked together, planned together. It was during a snowstorm in early December, with the wind howling outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, that Zachary formally proposed. They were sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, Zelda leaning against his chest as they watched the flames dance. "Zelda," Zachary said softly, his arms tightening around her. I know we talked about waiting, about giving it more time, but I have to tell you, I am more certain about this than I have ever been about anything. You are it for me. The one I want to spend my life with, grow old with, build a future with." Zelda turned in his arms to face him, her heart beginning to race. Zachary shifted, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. "This was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to save it for the woman I wanted to marry." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire. "Zelda Garrison, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? For real this time, not because of some horrible auction, but because we love each other and want to build a life together." Tears streamed down Zelda's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, Zachary, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then kissed her with a passion that stole her breath. They stayed there by the fire for hours, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about their future with excitement and joy. They were married 2 weeks later, on a crisp December morning in the small church in Calico. Emma and her husband Thomas made the trip from San Francisco to attend, along with their 3 children. Zachary's sister embraced Zelda warmly, whispering, "Welcome to the family. I have never seen my brother so happy." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Zelda wore a dress that Emma had brought for her, a lovely blue that matched her eyes. Zachary wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and deliriously happy. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife and Zachary kissed her, Zelda felt like her heart might burst with joy. The reception was held at the ranch. neighbors and friends gathering to celebrate. There was food and music and dancing, and for the first time in her life, Zelda felt completely free, completely happy, completely loved. That night, after the guests had left and it was just the two of them, Zachary carried Zelda over the threshold of what was now truly their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the one that had been his but was now theirs, and looked at her with such love and desire that Zelda felt her breath catch. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how much." "I love you too," Zelda whispered, reaching up to cup his face. "Thank you for seeing me that day in Calico. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me." "You saved me too," Zachary said, covering her hand with his. "I did not even know how lonely I was until you came into my life." They came together then, husband and wife, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and built something beautiful from it. Zachary was gentle and patient, making sure Zelda felt cherished every moment, and when they finally joined together completely, it felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Zachary's arms wrapped around Zelda, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "Happy," Zachary murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," Zelda replied, snuggling closer. They fell asleep like that, warm and safe and loved, the storm outside nothing compared to the peace they had found in each other. The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, and there were droughts and hard winters and times when money was tight. But Zelda and Zachary faced it all together, their love deepening with each challenge they overcame. Zelda proved to be a natural with horses, and Zachary made good on his dream of breeding quality stock. The double became known throughout California for their well-trained horses, and the ranch prospered. Zelda handled the business side, her education and natural intelligence serving them well as she managed accounts and negotiated sales. 3 years after their wedding, Zelda gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Samuel, after Zachary's father. Zachary was besotted from the moment he held his son, and Zelda fell even more in love with her husband watching him be a father. He was patient and gentle and involved in a way many men were not, changing nappies and walking the floor with a fussy baby and singing silly songs to make Samuel laugh. 2 years later came a daughter they named Rose, with her mother's blue eyes and her father's dark hair. Then another son, James, and finally another daughter, Lily. The house that had once felt empty rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Zelda could hardly remember the scared, desperate girl she had been that day on the platform in Calico. Emma and her family visited regularly, and the cousins grew up close. Zelda and Emma became dear friends, bonding over their shared experiences and their love for the men who had given them new beginnings. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary took Zelda on a picnic to the same spot by the creek where they had eaten lunch that first day she rode out with him to check the cattle. "You remember this place?" he asked as they sat in the shade of the cottonwood tree, the sound of the water babbling over rocks a soothing background. "Of course I do. This is where you told me about Emma and Mrs. Chen, where I started to understand the kind of man you are." "I have been thinking about that day a lot lately," Zachary said, taking her hand. "About how scared you must have been, how uncertain, and how brave you were to come with me anyway, to trust me." "Best decision I ever made," Zelda said, squeezing his hand. "I want you to know something," Zachary said seriously. "I know how we started was not conventional. I know there are probably people who still whisper about it, about the auction and everything. But Zelda, you are the love of my life." You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, my everything. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, pay 1,000 times more, anything to have you in my life." Tears pricked Zelda's eyes. "You gave me my life back. You showed me what love looks like, what respect and partnership mean. Our children are growing up knowing they are loved, knowing their worth is not determined by others' opinions. You did that, Zachary. You and your incredible, stubborn kindness." "We did that," Zachary corrected. "Together. That is what we do, Zelda. Everything together." He kissed her there under the cottonwood tree, and Zelda thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that horrible day in Calico to this perfect afternoon, from strangers to soulmates, from despair to joy. It had all been worth it. 20 years after their wedding, Zachary and Zelda sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Their children were grown now, Samuel running his own ranch, Rose married to a doctor in Sacramento, James working as foreman at the AA, and Lily studying to be a teacher in San Francisco, fulfilling the dream her mother once had. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest imaginings, the double known throughout the state for quality horses and honest dealings. They employed several hands year-round now, and the cattle herd had tripled in size. But none of that mattered as much as this, sitting beside the person you loved most in the world, hands linked, watching another day come to a close. "You ever think about that day?" Zelda asked quietly. "The auction?" "Sometimes," Zachary admitted. "Not because I regret it, but because I am grateful for it in a strange way. If it had not happened, we might never have met." "I prefer to think we would have found each other somehow," Zelda said. "We were meant to be together. The universe would have figured it out." "Maybe so. But I am glad it did not make us wait too long," Zelda laughed. "You paid $500 and your best mare for me. Sometimes I still cannot believe you did that." "Best money I ever spent," Zachary said firmly. "You want to know a secret, always. That mare I gave up. She was old and I was planning to retire her anyway. So really, I just paid $500 for the woman of my dreams. Bargain of the century if you ask me." Zelda gasped and swatted his arm playfully. "Zachary Aldridge, you telling me you tricked that auctioneer?" "I prefer to call it strategic negotiation," Zachary said with a grin. "Besides, I would have paid anything. The horse was just to make sure no one else could counter." She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You are impossible. You love me anyway. I do, more than anything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside the house, they could hear James and his wife preparing dinner, their 2 young children running around and laughing. 3 generations under one roof, at least for tonight, and Zelda's heart was full to bursting. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For seeing me that day. For choosing to help, for loving me, for giving me this life." Zachary brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for trusting me, for loving me back, for building this life with me. I am the luckiest man alive, Zelda Aldridge." "We are both lucky," Zelda said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We found each other against all odds and we built something beautiful." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Zelda thought about the scared girl she had been, standing on that platform, feeling like her life was over before it truly began. She thought about the cowboy who saw her not as livestock, but as a person deserving of dignity and choice. She thought about the love that grew between them, steady and true, weathering every storm. She had been given away like livestock, but Zachary had treated her like a queen from the very first moment. He had given her freedom, respect, love, and a partnership that made every day better than the last. Together they had built a legacy that would outlast them both. In the ranch they created, and the children they raised, and the love they shared. It was more than she ever dreamed possible, and it all started with one man who refused to let injustice stand unchallenged, who saw a woman in need and acted with compassion and honor. Their story was unconventional, born from tragedy and circumstance, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful. And as Zelda sat there on the porch with Zachary's arm around her, surrounded by family and the land they loved, watching another perfect sunset paint the sky, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home. The years continued to pass gently for Zelda and Zachary. They grew old together, silver threading through their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. The ranch eventually passed to James, who ran it with the same integrity and love his father had shown. Samuel's ranch prospered. Rose's husband became one of the most respected doctors in Sacramento, and Lily opened a school for girls in San Francisco, ensuring other young women received the education she believed everyone deserved. Grandchildren came, filling the ranch with noise and laughter during visits. Zachary taught them to ride, just as he had taught their parents. Zelda told them stories and baked cookies and made sure they knew they were loved unconditionally. In their 63rd year of marriage, Zachary fell ill. It was winter, and a cold settled in his chest that would not clear. Zelda nursed him tirelessly, sitting by his bedside, reading to him, holding his hand. Their children came, gathering around their father, but Zachary's eyes were always on Zelda. "Do not be sad," he whispered to her one evening when they were alone. "We had a beautiful life, Zelda, more than most people ever get." "We did," Zelda agreed, tears streaming down her face. "But I am not ready to say goodbye yet." "Neither am I," Zachary admitted. "But if it is my time, I need you to know something. Loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. You made every day brighter. You gave me a family, a real home. You were my partner in every sense of the word. Thank you for choosing me, for staying with me, for building this life with me." "I would choose you again in a heartbeat," Zelda said, pressing her forehead to his. "In every lifetime I would choose you," he smiled, lifting a shaking hand to cup her cheek. "My queen," he murmured. "You have always been my queen." Zachary passed peacefully in his sleep that night, Zelda curled beside him as she had been for over 6 decades. The grief was crushing, a physical weight on her chest, but beneath it was gratitude. Gratitude for every moment they had shared, every laugh, every kiss, every quiet evening on the porch, every challenge they had faced together. Zelda lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. Zachary had been her one true love, and she was content with the time they had been given. She spent her final years telling their story to anyone who would listen, making sure the world knew about the cowboy who saw a woman being sold like livestock and refused to accept it, who treated her like a queen from the very first moment and never stopped, who showed her what real love looked like. When Zelda died peacefully in her sleep at 89, she was buried beside Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children made sure the headstone told their story, not in shame but in celebration of a love that conquered injustice and circumstance. The double, a ranch continued for generations, run by their descendants who grew up hearing the story of how it all began. Of the auction in Calico and the cowboy who bid everything he had to save a stranger. Of the love that grew in the most unlikely soil and flourished for a lifetime. Travelers passing through Calico in later years would sometimes stop at the ranch, having heard the legend. They would stand on the porch where Zelda and Zachary had spent countless evenings, look out at the land they had tended together, and feel hope. Hope that love could triumph over darkness, that one person's compassion could change everything, that endings could be beginnings in disguise. The story of Zelda and Zachary became part of the fabric of Calico, a reminder of what courage and kindness could accomplish. Children grew up hearing about them, learning that your circumstances do not define you, that love is a choice you make every day, that treating people with dignity and respect is never wrong. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew through the valley and the sun set in brilliant colors, locals swore they could sometimes see two figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, hand in hand, watching the sky together just as they always had. Some said it was just tricks of the light, imagination running wild. But those who had known Zelda and Zachary, who had witnessed their love firsthand, knew better. That kind of love did not simply end. It echoed through time, a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other, every day, for a lifetime. The double, a ranch, stood for over 100 years, eventually becoming a historical landmark. Visitors came from all over to see where the legend had lived, to stand where Zelda and Zachary stood, to feel the peace that still seemed to permeate the land. And always, always, the story was told. Of injustice and compassion, of despair and hope, of a love that began in the worst possible way and became something beautiful, something lasting, something that reminded everyone who heard it that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference, that love, true love, conquers all. Zelda had been given away like livestock on that terrible day in 1883. But Zachary Aldridge, a cowboy with a kind heart and unwavering principles, had treated her like a queen from that moment forward. Together they built a life, a legacy, and a love story for the ages. And that, in the end, was everything.